Okay, Marshall, are you there?
Yep.
Ann Brown?
Present.
John H? John on? John H? I guess not. John N? Nickel?
Yes, present.
Lisa's on. George?
Good morning, Jim.
Harry is not able to be on, so he's not going to be with us. So I guess John
Hobold is here.
Was that John?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So I guess we have everybody but Harry.
Yes, so you have a quorum.
Okay. As an announcement, I have appointed Ann Brown, who is next year's treasurer, to this year's committee for the last month or two. So he is officially a member of the Budget and Finance Committee. We have a item 201 minutes of the last meeting. Are there any?
Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt, Jim. This is Karen.
Yep.
I need to have a sense of staff members on the line. I need to know which board members are on the line, please.
Okay. Anybody else on the line? Jim Sloan announced himself. Sue.
This is
Roberta.
Andy Maslick. Can you hear me okay?
Who?
Andy Maslick, Vanguard.
Okay, Vanguard. Thank you.
Bob Cordero.
Okay, Bob.
Brian Wallace.
Brian. Who else?
Jerry Connor.
Maloney.
Jerry Connor. Who else?
Donna Maloney.
Donna Maloney. Who else?
Tim Hurley.
Tim Hurley. Who else?
Carl Wilhelm.
Carl Wilhelm. Who else?
Bill
Todd
Schmidt.
Patty.
Who? Is that the boss?
Todd and Bill.
Oh, Todd and Bill. Okay.
Is Pete
Yes,
Finelli on the line?
Pete Finelli, are you on?
Yes, Pete's on.
Thank you. Is Russ Boston on the line?
Russ Boston on? Nope.
Sharon Heddick on the line?
Nope. Who else?
That's it, Jim. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's get back to the 2.01 minutes of the meeting of March 3rd and April 2nd. Any changes or corrections? None. We will move them forward. Pete, are you ready to do the review of the March, February, and March 2020 financials?
I am, Jim. Thank you.
Go to it.
Hoping everybody the financials. Hoping everybody can see the financials February up in front.
Oh, it's difficult.
No, they're not up.
You may need to refresh your browser. It's showing on my page. The February financials are up.
Shows
I have
online.
I can see them clearly.
And Pete, can you speak up, please?
I'll move to hold it in my hand. So thank you, everybody. We'll be showing two financials due to the BNF committees being postponed. Before any of the COVID impact, it had the effect. February was moving along very well. We were continuing to extend beneficial contributions on the operating income, 30,000 favorable, and against prior year, 264. We did start to see some of the capital-related impact. In February 23rd was the first day of any impact into the reserve funds, and as you can see, by the end of the month, we did have a $540,000 unrealized investment loss, and so that had the effect on the capital-related. But on the operating income statement, year-to-date, we were holding a $336,000 favorable variance and against budget and 476 against prior year. Moving to March. We had the beginning impact of our revenues on golf fees in particular. The membership, of course, holds up normally, but the revenues in golf had a almost $250,000 deficit against our budget and $170,000. Just a reminder, none of the courses were closed, but we did begin to see some impact. And also there was quite a bit of wet weather in the early part of March, just to remind everybody. We were able to adapt some of our operating costs at $187,000 favorable budget.
I'm sorry, I can't hear. There's too much
Can
background
someone please
noise.
mute their line?
Everybody mute.
Someone still talking, please. Thank you. So we were able to offset some of the revenue of almost close to $500,000 shortfall against budget with some operating expense reductions, $278,000 deficit, and against the budget against prior year. The revenues, again, were the main culprit, so that we had a $435,000 deficit. Moving to the year to date, oh, I'm sorry, then of course, if you move down into the capital related.
Only the host can talk now. Everyone can talk now.
So on the capital related, March 31st was pretty close to the absolute low of where our reserve funds were. And I think the lowest we ever got was about a 16% decline off of the apex. The broader market was down almost 30%. So some of our performance of the diversification of bonds and CDs and things like that helped abate that a bit. But it was still recognized at a $1.8 million unrealized loss in March. Again, not projecting too much, but April 30th, we should see some of that restore itself by with the entry in April financials. So the most important part is year-to-date through March, and with the buffer, so to speak, that we had leading into through February, we were able to still sustain favorable variances in our operating and our prior year variances. They're down considerably, of course, but $58,000 and $40,000. Down in the capital related, almost everything is holding up very well. Our investments, investment fees, realized gains, with the big, of course, impact being within our unrealized. And again, some of that has restored itself with April. ATF fees were also, even through March, about 70 or 75 fees ahead of the budget. So a shortfall that we are seeing likely to impact in April, again, provided a little bit of buffer for when this COVID hit. So that is the financials. Is there any questions that I can answer?
Anyone have any questions? I hear none. We will move them forward to the governing board. Thank you. We will now hear from Vanguard on the quarterly presentation.
Thank you, Kenneth. I have the agenda screen. Is there a way to populate the meeting material?
I believe you're up on the screen, Andy. We'll move it along as you tell us to.
Okay, I will. For some reason, I'll go on my own PDF. Spare me for 1 second. So, just before I dive in, have you allotted for me? hear me okay?
Yes.
How much time do I have allotted?
Well, how much do you need?
I could go on about.
20 minutes.
So is a half? Okay, I'll do my best. So here on page 4 of the performance report, titled "Global Markets Hit with Widespread Volatility," I provide some commentary as we dive into the material. It seems like on any given day, the amount of data and information we have just expands exponentially. I'll share with you a couple of quick new items that we just released today that are not included here, just to kind of give you a quick update on some of the commentary. A couple of key takeaways as it relates to our outlook going forward into this year and also into next year. Our expectation is that obviously we're in a recession. The recession will be short. And the expectation is with growth turning positive in the second half of the year. Now, that said, though, the expectation is that developed economies will not return to normal until late in 2021. So although we are expecting positive growth numbers second half, the expectation is not until late 2021 until we return to some sort of pre-crisis level. Our chief economist, Joe Davis, recently met with us, and he actually, I think, coined this quite succinctly, the two-phase recovery. So first, that business opens, restrictions ease, and the way that he phrased that or questioned that is, can I get on an airplane? And phase 2 is a bit more demand-driven, which the expectation is slower growth. So phase 2 question is, can I afford to or do I want to get on an airplane? That's the way he questioned or phased the recovery here. Labor markets in face-to-face sectors such as leisure, hospitality, obviously have been and will be his hardest. And our expectation as base case is that the most extreme social distancing measures will be lifted. So some of the data here as our base assumption and expectation is in the most extreme regions in the country that they would remove those extreme social distancing by June 30th. So, of course, that could change as we move forward. And, of course, if the virus does have a rebound during the second half of the year. I will share with you some updated valuations. Pete share with you a couple of updates as well as we move forward here. So on page 4, titled Global Markets Hit with Widespread Volatility, on the left side, we notice U.S. stocks being once again besting non-U.S. stock returns for the 3-month period and 1-year period. As you move towards the center section of the slide, bond markets really, what you saw in particular in March was a flight to quality. And the one thing you'll notice as it relates to returns is that just like you saw during the great financial crisis, there was this flight to treasuries. So treasuries for this period of time where you're better for, you saw spreads widen during this period, even compared to treasuries and corporate bonds. But if you actually track performance for the last few weeks, those investment grade, high quality corporate bonds actually have made up some of those lags in performance. So you have seen a bit of a normalization. So this disruption you saw in the bond markets was really short-lived, and your portfolio is invested strictly in investment grade or better. So if there was an exposure to below investment grade, you would have seen certainly much more severe losses, as Pete referenced earlier, down about 16% at the worst point. If we turn to the next slide on page 5, stocks across style, significant decline. Large vested small, growth vested value. And on the developed and emerging markets, non-U.S. side, pretty equal returns. The expectation is you could see this lagging effect as it relates to trade with China, with some of these emerging economies linger as global demand is subdued throughout the rest of the year and into next year. to provide a couple of quick other bits of commentary related to growth in various regions. So I mentioned that we do expect a bit of a recovery on the growth side. Second quarter, a decline in GDP growth is really going to be historic in nature as it relates to the decrease in quarter-over-quarter GDP growth. Now, that if you really pull economists and other financial firms out there's a pretty wide range of expectations for the second quarter. It would be 30%, 30% drop, which is historic in nature. As it relates to the base case for 2020 growth, the only region that we would expect a base case and what we know today to see slightly positive growth, when I say slightly, that being 1% growth, that being China, which is the lowest recorded growth since they started tracking growth for China back in the 1990s. But when you look globally, both U.S. and the UK, Europe, Japan, Australia, the expectation is negative growth as a base case for 2020. What you've seen here, and as you turn to the next slide, on slide 6, this really does provide you with some of the rationale, the reasoning why markets performing how they have been. Information technology for this period through March is your lowest detractor from returns. So specifically, information technology, healthcare, and consumer staples really being key drivers. On the other side, towards the right, no surprise, energy, which has really been all over the place, being your largest laggard. The markets, and if you follow the markets, there does seem to be a bit of a disconnect between the equity markets and what's happening in the and I guess the best rationale is this positive response to both fiscal stimulus on the legislative side and monetary stimulus on the Fed-driven side. And the expectation is that the markets are going to be forward-looking in nature, and that this the impact of growth, although will be significant and meaningful, that the markets seem to be looking beyond that. We'll see how that plays out throughout the rest of the year. Let me pause here before I go to the next few slides for any sort of immediate questions or comments.
Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? I guess you're doing a good job. Keep it up.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and turn to slide 10, and we're going to jump ahead for the sake of time. Slide 10 is kind of a high-level overview of the portfolio. This is the performance summary ending March 31, $20,944,959. If we take this through yesterday, this is the benefit of what are the challenges in working from home. I have slower internet access. 22,117,176. So you did see a bit of a significant recovery. We did do a rebalance on the portfolio on March 13th. So even though you're certainly more of a conservative mix as it relates to the makeup of the portfolio, the markets moved significantly enough where we did move beyond the 5% threshold away from policy allocations. So we did rebalance back to policy, which, based on current valuations, has actually benefited the portfolio at least through current day. You'll notice here the 1 and the 3 month periods negative, 1 year rolling period slightly negative. And to no surprise, you really, this is going to be largely driven from the equity exposure in the portfolio. If we delve down to the slide 12 of the performance report, it really does carve out the actual specific drivers of performance. I won't delve too deeply here, but I'll provide some commentary. And I think what you've seen here, beyond, of course, the equities being the key laggards here, on the bond side, what March is not really, or is reflecting here, is that and this kind of this short-term concern around liquidity. And what you saw there for a brief period of time is kind of an exodus and a concern around liquidity and investors moving to treasuries. You have seen the bond funds in your portfolio, the intermediate-term investment grade, the short-term investment grade. If you turn to the next page, long-term investment grade actually performed quite well post the March data. And I'll provide you a quick update on that because I think it is important to note. So, for example, the long-term investment grade for the month of April is up 6.5% through the end of last week. Compared to the total bond market and the broad U.S. investment grade market, which is up 1.92%. The intermediate term investment grade, which is another fund in the portfolio, up over 3%. So you have seen a bit of a return to normalcy as it relates to that liquidity crisis we saw briefly in the bond market. In fact, I would say our fixed income group is actually poised to benefit from that because they have the size and the scope to actually invest when investors are reacting in maybe a non-rational fashion. So you tend to find that these periods of stress actually tend to benefit our bond products because we do have the size and the scope and the ability to invest, and we're not required to sell. So let me pause for a second here as it relates to the makeup of the portfolio for any questions or comments. I have some additional forward-looking commentary in the next few slides.
Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? I guess you're doing a great job. My question is, do you recommend any changes in our portfolio? Do you think we're doing the right thing, or do you think we need to make changes?
Yeah, I actually had a similar question for the group. So here's my question, which is kind of a question to your question. Has anything changed since we've experienced this bout of uncertainty and volatility? And what I mean specifically is within the community, has the need heightened to draw funds from the portfolio over the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
Do you want to answer that, Pete?
I would say no. We'll get to that in about 5 minutes on our budget presentation.
So my immediate response is we tend not to we are as best as we can not to allow what's happening in the current marketplace impact how we're investing for the long term, and it's sometimes quite challenging. Obviously, we've had historical bouts of volatility here the last month or so. My suggestion would be no. If there was a need, if there was a new known need for funds, or a lack of funds, whatever the case may be, that would necessitate a revisit of policy. Barring that, I would not recommend any sort of immediate changes.
Okay.
Jim?
Here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah.
For Vanguard, just a quick question. How often do we look at this and rebalance our portfolio? Thank you.
Sure. No, thank you for the question. So we review this quarterly on a calendar standardized basis. So I sit down with my analysts then on a calendar quarterly basis to review your portfolio. We keep an eye on this, though, throughout a weekly basis. So meaning when we did have the opportunity to rebalance in mid-March, we didn't wait until the end of the quarter to rebalance. So we as best as we can, we keep an eye on the allocation on a daily basis. And if we move beyond that 5% band from your policy allocation, that provides an opportunity to rebalance. So I'll sit down with Ben. We'll discuss the situation, and I would approve, or just to give you kind of a candid summary of what we've done the last few weeks. Almost every one of my clients, we had the need to rebalance, so we did so. Unless there was something that was unique to the client, if we knew that you needed funds that were coming out in the short time, or some other unique circumstance, but we would typically do that intra-quarter as well.
Any other questions? Any other questions of Vanguard? Anybody? Last call. Are you complete now, or are you finished?
Well, it's up to you. I have other material. If you have the time, I'm happy to chat through the last few slides, but either way, I want to work within your time frame.
Looks to me like you've done a good job. Nobody any questions, so I think we're done. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, and always happy to chat. Off these scheduled meetings as well. Pete, thank you for your help too during this period as well.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to the redlining of FI2, which is 3.03. This is a policy that's kind of been approved, yet it hasn't gone to the governing board. The former committee, B&F committee, did review this. They went over it with Pete Vanelli, and everybody's agreed that this is what we should do, and we would like to move it forward. So unless I have any objections, we're going to move this to the governing board. We'll ask for a motion. But first of all, are there any comments or questions from the board committee? From anybody? A motion to move this to the governing board would be in order.
This is Marshall. I make a motion.
Support?
This is John
Second.
Hobold. I second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. Okay, motion passed. We'll move to 3.04, which is FI4. This has come up a couple of times. I'm going to read you something because if you go to the policies, you won't find this. And it was, we don't know why, but it doesn't happen. So anyway, I'm going to read this to you. This is from a meeting of the governing board on 4/27/2017. There were 8 people on the board. I happen to be one of them. And it says reserve funds 9.03, which doesn't mean anything except at that meeting. And it says, I move that the governing board approve increasing the reserve funding percentage goal from 60% to 70% of the full funded amount determined by the annual reserve study recommended by the Finance Committee. This was passed unanimously, and then it got thrown in the cupboard, I guess. It never got put into the policy. So if you hunt for the policy, you're not really going to find it. But this is where we're at officially and legally. Then this year, after we hired an expert there who said that it should be 70%, and that's why we went and moved to 70, we had an expert and says, well, 30% is good, much better. Anyway, they thought that we should have a variable rate, and I agree with that. I think variable rate is makes a little more sense with a volatility of $50 million or thereabouts. So the expert said that if you go no lower than 30%, that you're okay. I'm going to put in my little pitch right here. I think that's ridiculous. I think it's way too low. And I think that the problem I have with it is this. If you have a base of 30% and all of a sudden something like this last month happened, only it stays, now you've got a $4 million reduction. Now you're not at 30%, you're at 20%. And I've talked to this Pete about it, and Pete says, well, we don't plan to get to 30%. Well, if you don't plan to get there, then you don't need to be there. That's the other opinion I have. But I'm going to let Pete talk about it because he thinks that 30% is the right move. I don't. And so we'll go from there and we'll have the discussion about that percentage before we have another comment from John Nichols, who also had another item on it. So anybody on the, first of all, Pete, would you like to talk about it?
Well, thank you very much. That was a good background. Our purpose for the 30%, as you alluded to, was not to approach those numbers. We have been demonstrating that with the budget process, the end of next year would have a low point, if you will, of 44%, and this is before we, A, had a recovery of the stock market, B, we've reduced the capital, which you'll hear in a few minutes, and C, the overall savings from this current year are not going to be reflected until the year is done. We're looking at still a $600,000-$700,000 savings that will effectuate into future. So what you have in front of you now is, of course, what has been seen by many of you. These are, I don't profess to know the prior consultant, but this Association Reserves is well known. They do over 25,000 active ones, and they've performed over 45,000 reserve studies. So they are very much considered the experts in the industry. We've showed this very often that the phrases of poor, fair, and good are the interpretations of percentages. We've showed this in reserve strength. And just as a reminder, this is risk is not like you're out of money. This is just that you would have to go to a special assessment to begin to fund any kind of repair and replacement that was unanticipated. So this, to Bill and I have presented this many times, and to us, this is probably the most important slide, and that's that in the 40 or 50% range we currently reside, and with a 10-year what if that we have in the 50 to 55% range, we carry less than a 5 to 7% risk of having to do that special assessment. We're not over here in the 0 to 30. And so the reason for putting the 30 into the bylaw was to be consistent with the interpretation of our the expert that we have counseled with. So that was the reason for the number. As I've alluded to in a few minutes, we'll be showing what we are doing about that on the capital spend and the inflows and the outflows. They all carry, some element of change with the COVID and in the industry, but we'll talk about each of those. But we aren't approaching that, and certainly every year the governing board approves the budget. So, if they want to, approach the number that we project using the budget assumptions, then that's going to be the number that you're going to fix your capital spend to. So, to us, the 30% was simply to coincide with the expert.
Okay, thank you. Do committee, any comments, committee?
This is John Nicholas.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay.
Which John?
This is John Nicholas.
Go ahead.
Okay, I've been thinking about, what was that? Okay, I've been thinking about this for the last couple of weeks. I don't like the 30% showing up the way it's showing up there. I think it needs further explanation if we're going to have that. And based on the percentage fund graph that Pete has shown here, showing poor, fair, and good, I wanted to put those explanations into the policy here, and then with a few statements down below that. And what I proposed doing here, and I'll just read this thing off without just the way it would be if we were doing it, repair replacement requirement, industry standard for a good reserves is one set between 70 and 130%. A fair reserve is set between 30 and 70%, and a poor reserve set between 0 and 30%. And down below that would be 4.1.2.1.1. A fair reserve rating is only acceptable if the rating is at 50% or above. If it goes below 50%, a plan must be in place to bring it above 50%. And then at 4.1.2.1.2, poor reserve rating is not acceptable. I think that would define this. Any comments on this?
Well, I think it's pretty hard to visualize over the phone. It's something new, and I think it would have to go on the screen. It would have to go to everybody if we make a change like that ahead of time to review it, and that's my opinion.
I would agree. It's Lisa. I would agree with that.
This is John Hobo. I am equally uncomfortable with the 30% as a low number. I think we all would probably grab our own number. And I think it would be, if possible, I think we ought to defer a decision on this until we could perhaps have a more interactive forum in future months.
I understand what you're saying, John, and I don't disagree 100%. The problem is I'm not sure we're going to get to there. And then besides that, this needs to be in a motion to the governing board. The governing board then has to meet. I'm not sure we have time to do all of that. And I would like to see it done this year, because having a range of 70% funded on the books when you're only at 45 or whatever we're at, 48, is not really very sound practice. And therefore, I would like to move it to something and then allow next year's committee they're going to review them all anyway, and then they can do what they seem wise to do after several months of discussion if they wish. And so for that reason, I would like to move. And I don't want to get involved in all of John's questions, although I like some of them. I think it really muddies up the water. I would simply like to stay with where we're at, only I'm not comfortable with 30%. I would like it at least at 40. And then I could live with it. And I guess I want to hear if the rest of you can, and then we'll go from there.
Jim,
Oh, go ahead.
Identify yourself, somebody.
This is Ann
Who?
Brown. Ann
Ann
Brown. Yes,
Go ahead.
I was just sitting here thinking that I agree. The proposal has merit, but I think it needs to have more study before we would move forward to taking it to the board. In the interest of getting something done right now, I would fully support the 40% and then looking at this in more depth going forward. I think we need something above the 30. That's
Yes, thank you very much, Ann, and that's very good observation. But we have been studying this for months. Although,
okay, well, I'm new to the party.
I understand. So. Go ahead. Somebody else wanted to jump in. Who was it?
Yeah, this is Marshall.
Oops. Go ahead, Marshall.
Pete, do you have? Where are we right now?
Well,
40 what?
I think he was in the range. I'd say, as he said, maybe 46, 47, 48%, somewhere in the range. And the reason I moved that is the basis of those savings and things I was talking about, and the projection of the rest of the year. Both of those have some good side and bad side to it, but 47, 48 is what I believe we reside at currently.
Okay, since we're there, we could say 40% and be careful with that. I mean, we're well above that, so I see no reason why we shouldn't do that with 40.
Okay. Somebody else wanted to comment? Are you
It's
done?
Lisa. It's Lisa. I agree with Ann. If we have to make a decision, I would agree with going with a 40%. If we have to go with a vote, I would go with the 40%, but I wouldn't go any higher.
Any other comments? Any comments?
Yeah, this is Brian Wallace. I have a comment. I agree with what's been said here. I think 30% is unreasonably low, and I don't think our members would be comfortable with that. But as I look forward on the CFO's reserves fund estimated going forward, we drop below 40% starting in 2023 through 2026 or 27. And that, to me, shows that 30% is not a number that we should even be considering, because we're rapidly approaching it. And that includes increases in the APF fee that have been forecast for that too. So I think this ought to be, since there's no need to hurry on this, we ought to table this until the committee can meet next year and do more thinking about it. But just to hurry up and put a number down doesn't make sense to me.
Any other comments?
This is John Nicholas. Okay,
Go
I
ahead.
don't have a problem with having it going with 40% and bringing up and rewriting this thing next year. I think we need a better explanation than what we got. 40 would work for now.
Okay, I don't know what you're asking for. Anybody
I'm
else?
just basically making a statement that, I can agree that 40% would be fine with me. That changing it at this point, I recognize this is a problem. I had to bring it up. I had to bring something up to kind of, get people thinking about this thing a little bit better. And but I can go with 40% for now.
Okay, well, it sounds to me like we've gone around the horn. If there's somebody that wants to make a motion to change our reserve percentage from 70% to a range of 40 to 100%, that motion to move that to the governing board would be in order.
As John Nicholas, I'll make that motion.
Need a support?
Ann Brown, I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion from the board?
Jim?
Or the committee first?
Jim, George, just a quick comment on this. Agreeable to the number, fine. We have to rewrite this policy. We have to publish it. It can't go to the governing board as it says right now. It has to be redone because right now we are sitting and we are by our policies, we're at 70%. So if we want to change this, we have to go through the process of rewriting this policy and bringing it back to the committee and then moving it forward to the board. Okay?
I thought that's what we wrote it out, George. It's written out. It's written right.
Well,
Yeah.
Gentlemen, ladies, time out. Right now, you are the revised red line policy that you have published is saying you want the reserves to be between 70 and 100, 70 and 100%. It's going to be 30 and 100%. That's what you have published. So now you have, if you want to redo this, you have to republish it, okay, to make that 40 number. Okay?
Good point.
Just saying.
I'm not, this is Karen. I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow this a little bit. We're looking at FIL 4 at section 4.1.2.1.
That is correct.
And we're talking about, we have struck out the 70 and put 30 to 100. If your committee is making that 40 to 100, I believe that can be forwarded for discussion to the board. I'm not understanding why there's a problem changing that 30 to 40 if the committee recommends that.
Well, if the committee recommends it, Karen, that's fine to move that forward. However, you've already published this as this is the amendment to the policy and procedures, and there's a time frame that has to be put in that for publication. I'm just saying.
We post-publish any policy changes that the board votes on that are approved for 30 days. So I'm a little confused by what we're talking about regarding publication.
Then I'll take this up with you on the sidebar then, Karen.
That'd be fine. I mean, right now, I just need to understand the redlining, please. So I need to understand if there's a motion by John Nicholas, are we changing 4.1.2.1 to read, there's a strikeout of a strong, and we're agreeing for unacceptable reserves is one set between 40-100%. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's the correct motion.
Thank you.
My suggestion, rather not to defer or to argue with George, because he's sure got more brains about this than I do. My suggestion is we move it forward. If it can't go, it can't go. But if we do it, then if we don't do it, I know it can't go because we don't have the time. So my suggestion is pass the motion, move it on, let the governing board deal with it.
Okay, and the motion is in regard to the wording at 4.1.2.1.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion from the committee? Any discussion from the audience? All in favor of the motion as it is written, that we're changing the wording from 40 to 100% instead of 70? All say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All say no. Everybody, it's passed unanimously. We're going to move to FI 12 and 305. FI 12, what are we doing here, Pete? That's your deal.
This is a very simple, thank you. This is a very simple strike through of some unnecessary language at 3.1.1, you see up on the board, and 3.1.2, we noted that FDI insured banking investments and insured investments. But if you reference down to all of our investments right here at 4.4.2 are all to be held that are members of the FDIC. So it just appeared that there was some redundancies. Very, very simple, non-effectual change, but just trying to clean it up a little bit.
Any questions?
This Marshall move to approve.
Move approve with change, and it's second.
Second, John Nicholas.
Ann Brown, second.
John Nicholas seconded. All questions? Any questions on the motion? Any questions from the audience? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. Okay, now we get fun. Now we can do this one of 20 different ways. The next item is discussing the budget capital over 50,000. And we can take each item and then have the committee discuss that particular item and either say we want it or we don't, or we can take the whole thing, review it again, and then start item and item. I kind of like where we just go down the list, and if somebody's got an objection, we talk about it and decide, yeah, it should be stay in or stay out. What do you want to do, committee?
Just go down the list.
Okay, who's going to take the list? Carl, are you, or who's going to do this?
Mr. Young, this is Bill Schwinn speaking.
Okay, Bill.
Just for clarification, do you want this whole? Did you want to see the operations budget, or you just want me to skip to the capital?
We're just talking about the 50 and over.
Okay.
That's all we care about.
Jim, excuse me, this is Ann Brown.
That's all the.
This is Ann Brown. Are we going to talk about non-capital or other items in the budget for next year?
Anything over 100,000 or 50,000, yes.
Okay, but we're not talking about anything else in the budget for next year.
No, it was not put on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Bill, are you doing this or what?
I am. I was prepared to walk through this, but I'm going to have Pete skip to the capital slide, please, Pete.
Well, Bill, how would you like to work it? Because I know that there's some people here, I've had some people comment that they're not in favor of Project X, whatever X is.
Yeah, and that's fine. And there was a request to have our projects, of 50,000 and above reviewed. And we're in this report here in front of you, we've dropped that down to $5,000. So anything $5,000 and over in our capital budget are itemized. So we can take a look at that. But if I can, just real quickly, a month or so ago, prior to the COVID-19 crisis, when we were putting our budget together, we assembled one. Hopefully you can see your screen. We were dealing with golf course irrigation issues. We were dealing with golf R&R, some new projects. And we had about a $7 million golf budget, dropping down to the recreation centers and some R&R needs as far as some new capital. We had close to $5.5–6 million along those lines. And we walked in the door with about a $13 million proposal. Moving forward, we had committee meetings, direct meetings with our staff as far as what can we delay without crunching too many things, And when it came to golf in particular, we are still negotiating with the Department of Water Resources, as you know, relative to some upcoming deadlines that they have, be it Plan 4, which is 2023, which limits the amount of acre feet of water we can throw on our golf courses. And in 2025, they regulate how many acres of turf that we're allowed to have. And what we're debating at the moment is the fact that some of our golf courses were built prior to 1984, which has a grandfather right. And I'm not an attorney, unfortunately, and we are trying to get that in writing from them so we have something to stand by. We're being told 2 different stories by 3 different people down there, and we just want that clarified. So in the meantime, we have a few years that we can kind of push off on these projects, although it would be nice to get them done. If we don't have to eliminate as much turf as we need, that obviously is going to affect irrigation design and those types of things, which affect cost. So obviously, we're taking a sizable amount of money off of the golf proposal and got that down to about $2 million, and we'll move forward from there. Plenty of time to discuss those options as well. When it comes to facility maintenance, Pete, go ahead and jump to the next slide, please. Thank you. Again, we had $3 million and $2.5 million originally budgeted for R&R and some new projects. Committees took a look at that. Facilities, clubs, B&F, I think earlier, about a month or so ago. And some of those projects were revised down to the numbers that you see on the right of your screen, 2.7 and about $1 million. Of the projects, that's okay. Of the projects that were changed, we basically eliminated mini golf lighting, the Kuntz shower project going on with some construction work over at Kuntz, and with some project savings going on there that Carl's operating. I believe a facts and findings form and report will be delivered to you either at your next governing board meeting, but with the savings that we incurred thus far in our construction this year at Kuntz, we hopefully can get that done this fiscal year and will not need that money next year. And then there's some other projects under 50 grand that were eliminated to lower that number down to $1 million. Moving forward, Pete, if you could go to the new projects. There you go. Basically, you can see the revisions on the right as far as calling a timeout, as far as a delay. Can we postpone some of these projects relatively to be it the fact that they are new in a time of financial crisis? So those decisions were looked at and recommended, and those projects there are the Boomers Club, the potential shuffleboard conversion to social gathering, as well as Beardsley aquatics and locker room, and some aquatics work, shower work at RH Johnson. And I've got the new construction and revisions down to $1 million. Please, Pete, if you could please advance that one slide, and I'll let you take it from here. But once we got to the $13 million mark in our first round of revisions, we basically went from $13 million and revised golf and revised recreation down to 6.2. I'll let Pete kind of address the 6.2 scenario, but where we were with that was typically the operational savings from this fiscal year that we're envisioning was going to be married to the amount of APF fees that we collected this year to basically give us the $6.2 million to move that forward. So that being the case, we're still in pretty good shape, considering the economy as we speak, to move forward with a $6.2 million budget as a potential wash, and we do not have to withdraw any funds from our reserve. And that's pretty much of an average of what we've been doing over the last several years when it comes to your annual capital improvement work. But knowing the economy that we're in, and knowing that the board, I think, wanted to take a harder look at some of the projects that we've got, we took it the next step further. Pete, if you could advance that. Well, first of all, should I stop there for any discussion, or you want me to keep going?
No, unless anybody's going to. Does anybody have any question on what he just brought up?
Yeah, I've lost everything on my screen. Is there a reason for that?
Not that I know of. Katie's in the neighborhood. You have nothing. What's on your screen? What's on your screen, Mark?
The prior agenda items on my screen with a whole bunch of circles with our initials on them.
Does they join me up with the number 638?
Yeah, let me look. Okay, I'll hit that. Huh, I don't know. Well, it's okay. I've got this other stuff photocopied anyway, so I can follow my own sheets.
Okay, anybody else have Okay, Bill, then go ahead.
Okay, I'm just going to real quickly, staff did a once-over on our line item budget when it came to large capital items, large all the way down to $5,000. And we took a look primarily at the figures that you're looking at your screen now, and they focus primarily on new projects. So, we can call a timeout on new, and there's a few R&R items in there that we can certainly talk about, but we've identified like $1.8 million that potentially could come off that 6.2. Keep in mind that 6.2 is a current wash as far as the financial capabilities that we currently have based on the money in the bank and where we are now budget. We're good to go at 6.2 if you wanted to, and Pete can talk about where we're at. I believe at 44% based on that number, and he can give you the detail on that. But there's a $1.8 million savings potentially, and then rolling forward, Pete.
Before you get started, Pete, I want to hear from the committee a little bit. Do you want to go through item by item and see if we can reduce this farther, or are you happy with the 6.2, promoting it and moving it to the governing board? Comments, please.
Well, I think this is Marshall. I think that if we would indicate if you want to cut 500,000 out, I think that's what we should say. Then the staff, it's their job, I think, to go through and determine what's 500,000. I mean, I don't like going through each individual item.
Okay. Anybody else?
From the audience, John Nicholas.
Okay. Sorry.
This is John Nicholas.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. Taking a look at this, and I like the way it's presented. They've eliminated some expenses and basically pushed it forward into later years. And they've left us with basically $500,000 for our budget. And then they turn around and said, okay, if the economy turns because of the virus, we can put on hold almost $2 million. To me, that is the proper approach. All these items, I looked down at all these items here that are listed, and I agree that they belong on the budget. I wouldn't change any of them. But I also agree that having this delay capital item list is very useful and allows them to turn around and say, okay, we don't have the money, we're not going to have the money. There's an emergency, and we can go through this list and drop off some of these items, even though they've been approved, or to be considered next year.
Okay.
And, I would just soon vote on the $5 million the way it is right now.
Well, I think it's $6 million.
6.2.
It's 6.2, right? 6.2.
6.2. Yes.
Right. That's what I figure we're dealing with here when we've got everything together. But it's broken down into 1.8 and the 4.3. And I just don't have any problem with the proposal and the way that they're looking at this thing, which I think is correct. Okay. It's just a matter, do we like the items or not that are on this list? Or if they dropped items further up, do we disagree with what they proposed?
That's why we're here. Any other comments from any board members?
Committee members? This is Brian.
Brian, well, just a minute, Brian. Any other committee members first?
Tim, this is Ann Brown.
Go ahead, Ann.
I definitely take a conservative approach, and I think we're probably going to see a round 2 of the COVID-19 next year. I think we need to be aware that we may have reduced golf fees next year. We're not sure how things will go with the APFs. I would think in these unprecedented times, maybe we need a 2-pronged approach to this by going ahead and approving the 4.386 that's still left in there, and leaving those delayed capital items as things that we might review mid-year. I know that's not how it's always been done, but quite frankly, we're living in some rather different times now, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to go back to this is how we've always done it.
Okay. Any other committee members?
This is John Hobolt. I think there is great merit in what John N. mentioned and talked about very nicely. I also agree with Ann Brown's comments. I guess I sort of think of it as we ought to give a firm recommendation to approve the 4.3 million, 4.386, and put the secondary list up for maybe the first meeting in the next fiscal year of the board. But I'm reluctant to shoot all of our bullets with so many unknowns.
Let me ask the brains to be whoever answered the question. But
Jim, before you do that, this Lisa, and I haven't said anything yet.
Lisa.
I'm going to strongly agree with both Ann Brown and John Hobolt in their responses. I would absolutely agree 100% with what Ann Brown is suggesting.
Okay, thank you. My question to anybody that knows the answer, is it possible to do that? What Ann Brown suggested. I think you have to push the budget now for next year, and I don't know. Can you change it?
This is Bill Schwinn. Jim, if I may address that.
Please.
Budgets, once approved, you can always spend less. You cannot increase your fees once a budget is set. So if you set a capital budget of 4.3 and then opt for another 1.8 when the time comes, that money will not be budgeted.
So in other words,
you can approve to sit. I mean, typically what we've done in the past is a lot of times that you budget a lot of capital items, and due to time constraints or changes in demographics or something, they just don't get carried through for whatever reason. And I think we've got enough discipline to understand the economy, to take a look at where we are. If this thing rises up again and performs like it's doing now and hurts us a little financially on the revenue side, we address that at that point in time. We call timeout and we don't construct. Every project that you see in front of you, over $1,000 is in front of the board as far as documents, contracts, and how we proceed in getting things done. So the governing board ultimately has to sign, whether red light, green light.
And this Marshall, don't forget that, by the way, I thought you guys did a great job with what you cut back and got clear down to half or whatever it is. But don't forget that once you don't budget it, you don't get it back.
That is true.
What did you say?
So once you don't budget something this year, you never get that back.
That's right.
In other words, if you don't budget let's just say you don't budget $1 million for the Grandview, that's fine. But will we have to double budget next time when something else comes up like that? You just never get it back. I've done budgets for a long time, and you just never get it back. And so I think to reduce more than you've done, I think would be a mistake.
Well, the other issue that we have is that all we're doing is deferring this stuff. We're not canceling it. We might cancel some. The majority of it we're deferring. We're not saying, well, we're never going to do it. So
Right.
all we're doing is pushing it off to a little later time. But I appreciate what everybody's saying. I am one that doesn't want to spend more money than we're taking in. And I think Bill's approach is that if we approve the 6.2, whatever it is, budget with the constraints, realizing that if we don't have the funds, we aren't spending it, I see no problem with that. That's my opinion. Anybody else want to say anything? Anybody else in the audience want to say anything?
This is John Hobold. I guess I'd like to add an additional comment then. Based on the discussion here about the need to, sort of budget it or not, would a compromised position be approve it, but make a strong agenda item for the first meeting in the fiscal 21 year to be for the Budget and Finance Committee and staff to do an assessment on this $1.9 million hit list?
Well, I think that's a privilege of the Budget and Finance Committee. Anytime they can do it the whole thing if they want to. And then they can recommend to the governing board that they not approve, that they not go ahead with those projects. So I think that's the prudent thing. And I like the problem that Bill shows, that if we don't approve the 6.2, we aren't getting any of it done. And if the economy does roll to the better, I agree with Ann. We may have stage 2 of this. This may go on forever. Who knows? But if it doesn't, we look pretty stupid not even coming up with any, because we're just putting it off.
Yes, sir. And if I can just, this is Bill again, I'm sorry. Bill,
go ahead.
I just want to just throw in a couple of things, and Pete can mop this up when I'm done with it. But last year, January through December, in our APF fees, we collected $4.6 million. And this year, based on the pages that are just below the screen that I'm staring at, is about $4.3 million worth of capital requests. And so based on that scenario, if we look at our APF fees that we collect on a calendar year from January through December, that is money in the bank. And so come this time of year, when we start putting our budget together for July, we know what that number is. And so as we sit here right now, if we were to claim that, our capital money for APF is 6.6, whatever we brought in, and we're proposing to spend next year 4.4, that's a positive for us. Carl and Russ and all of our staff know what number they have to work with, and they can start applying that to a lot of the projects that we have in our reserve study and R&R and what we know we need. And then typically the operational savings that we have over the course of the year gets added to that for any kind of new projects and other things coming down the road. And we also have the ability to tap into our reserve fund if needed. But as we sit here today, we don't have to tap that fund, and the 6.2 essentially is a wash. Now, as we sit as of April 28th, we're not that far behind when it comes to APF fees, believe it or not. But I think that will change. But as we sit here today, year to date, we are 27 homes behind. Not that of an incredible loss, but we were ahead. We were doing really, really well in January. We were doing very well in February and March, and then this thing hit. And last year, April, we brought in 157, I believe, home sales. And this year, year to date, we're down to like 89. So took a big hit right now with COVID on APF. But if we look at that more on a calendar basis than a fiscal basis, we'll know next December how much money we brought in on APF, which would help us define our capital budget for next year. I'll stop there.
One of the comments that I've heard, Bill, is that the budget came in originally at 13 million, and we only had, let's say, 6 million to spend. It seems to me like sometimes, or at least I was told by people, and I kind of agreed, it looks to me like we should do it the other way around. We should figure out how much money we got coming in and then decide what we need, rather than decide what we need and then budget the money. Anyway.
I would agree with that, sir. But really, the big ticket, obviously, was golf course irrigation. And that's not really going to go away. We just got to figure out a way around that. And I think prior to a couple of slides earlier, for the last 3 years, we have not increased golf fees. And that has been rectified thanks to Mr. Hurley and the golf committee. So, you know, in the next 10 years, I think we're projecting, based on the average of rounds being played, I think we're projecting about $6.5 million coming in over the next 10 years to help offset the cost of a lot of those irrigation plants.
Well, but that also might just offset the operational cost. It ain't going down. Okay, anyway, I think we've beat this to death. First of all, before I move away from the committee, does anybody in the audience have anything they would like to say about this?
Yes, this is Brian Wallace.
Go ahead, Brian.
I am disappointed that not on the list of proposed projects to be deferred is the metal shop. And I will leave that as it is.
Okay. Any other comments from the outside? Okay.
This is Carl Wilhelm.
Go ahead.
Jim?
Who is this?
This is Carl Wilhelm.
Carl,
Carl.
Carl,
Okay.
go ahead.
I also would like to mention that each and every year when I work with staff and clubs and managers to establish the full budget, while it's being reviewed, I actually strongly schedule. I do a preliminary schedule for all of those projects as if they were approved in full. The benefit of doing that is as they go under this scrutiny and some things get removed off that approval list, I still know basically with Pete Finelli how it looks. Our spending is going to happen throughout a 12-month cycle. So basically coming out of the gate in a July 1st application, I basically schedule all of the things that are inconvenient to our members and get it done in the summer. And a lot of those items are the small dollar items. The large dollar items are definitely pre-planned, and they definitely show a scheduled event on our calendar. So let's say, for example, the metal shop. If that were approved, the metal shop is not a project that would even happen until January of 21. So we have time to discuss as staff, as a governing board, on whether those things should move forward. I just want to put that ease into everybody's mind that nothing, not everything can be accomplished in a 3-month cycle of summer. So that's all I have to add.
Any other comments? I would like to see
it's a commitment of funds, not scheduling, that we're talking about.
Right. This is Lisa Vines, and I think that I'm on this note with Brian Wallace. I think that the metal shop needs to be looked at seriously with that $410,000 commitment that we're asking the governing board to commit to.
Okay.
This Marshall, isn't there another issue with the metal club? Aren't we?
That was addressed. That was addressed last year in the budget. That $250,000 for the easement problem, to where we would have avoid a potential liability lawsuit issue. This is a new build where they would add space and storage for them. For the 410.
This is Carl Wilhelm, and of that 250,000, none of it has been spent.
Right.
Okay, just making that clear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's get back. Go ahead.
This is Sue. I have a comment. I have a concern about the metal shop as well. Committing $660,000 to a project when we don't know what our finances are for sure going to be makes me nervous. So I'm just registering that comment.
Thank you.
Jim, this is Jerry Connor. I share Brian and Sue's concerns about metal shop.
Okay. Any other comments?
This is Ann Brown. I just have a question, just showing my ignorance here. But if something was approved in the current year capital budget and did not get spent, are those funds considered available next year to be spent?
Yes.
They carry forward.
This is Pete Finelli. Yeah, this is Pete Finelli. Capital items can actually remain. I've seen some that were still as many as 2.5 years out from the approval date. We use a term called encumber, so our capital tracker will retain those available funds until it's either spent or closed out as unnecessary. At this juncture, that 250 will carry over.
And where will that be shown on the financial statement?
At the end of the year, we have a liability within our capital portion called encumbrance, and it ties to the capital tracker component.
So this, Marshall, thinking ahead on that particular item, can we budget, let's say 200,000 this year, and put that with the 250 and wait for the next year then to finish it out?
Good, if we thought it did any good. Yeah.
The problem with that is, you know, your cost of construction goes up, what, 15% a year? I forget the percentage, but you know, if you don't spend it now and wait 2 years, you're going to have to add to it because of the increase.
It sounds like the board's going to overrule you whatever you do anyway. They've almost got enough votes right there.
It's not a good practice to do that because it gets very difficult to track.
What do you mean?
Wilhelm again?
Carl, go ahead.
Okay, so let's just clarify so that everybody's on the same page again. $500,000 was requested last year, solved the issue. The board said try to solve it with $250,000. It is not solvable with $250,000. So hence the request for the $660,000 in whole over the two approved budgets. And the hope here is that once the designs are in place, that project that has a $96,000 contingency, the finished project could hopefully get done in a range of $570,000 instead of the $660,000. So again, $250,000 sitting here today not being spent is not being spent because it does nothing for us. Thank you.
Well, that isn't quite how it went. You threw 3 different numbers at us, and the board only passed the lowest number. And it was never 660,000. It keeps growing all the time. So that's a little bit misleading.
That is not accurate, Brian. So again, we gave the governing board a $500,000 request to correct the situation.
Okay, let's not get into it here. Let's get on. Yes.
Jim, George, just one thing. Everybody's talking about the metal shop and about the dollars that go in there. one of the things we talked about, and I know Bill is working diligently on this, is a master plan. And I think that an idea with this metal shop and these other things, until we have that master plan in place of where we're going to go and how we're going to allocate funds accordingly, the line item on this one should really be held back. And I'm just, and not only that, but even the 250 that we have allocated already may should just be removed from our encumbrance at that point. Because without a master plan, we don't have any idea of exactly how we're going to do it. We need to stop band-aiding things and fix them once and fix them right. Thank you.
Hey, this is John Nicholas.
Yep.
Okay. One thing I recall Carl said about the metal shop was that there were some safety issues. Maybe he could address those.
Carl?
I was just unmuting, I'm sorry. So the safety issues are being addressed today, that if they arise due to the inclement weather, a monsoon season, that area gets closed. It's not a situation that any dollars can be spent to repair because we're in an illegal easement situation. It's a compounded issue. We have safety due to a shed roof that shouldn't be there in the first place. The shed roof has to be removed at some point, and when that gets removed, then the materials and the equipment working there cannot be used at all for the future because they cannot be rained on, so they have to be relocated in a new structure. So one thing cannot happen without the other. Thank you.
Okay.
This Marshall again. The old saying, you can't beat it. If it's time to beat a dead horse, it's time to dismount. And we talked. How many times have we talked about this? We have to do something. That's just part of the liability thing. So I guess I think that it's time we go ahead and do something.
Anybody else? I'd hate to have a $600 or $6 million project. Their budget's held up by $600,000. Anyway, I guess we. What do you want to do, committee? I would like to see a move to the governing board with $6.2 million and let the staff worry about the problems.
Jim, it's Lisa. I got disconnected for a brief minute, so I had to reconnect. So I'm not sure where we're standing, if you were in mid-vote or something. So I just got reconnected.
Thank you. No, we're talking about trying to get a motion to move forward with the $6.2 million and make the staff aware of any second virus, and they just won't spend it. That's the suggestion that I hear the most of, but we need to move forward. How many public forums are you going to have this year, Bill? Bill?
Due to the public meeting crisis that we're kind of dealing with, speaking with Jim the other day, we're looking at a workshop that the governing board is going to have coming up on the 8th, I believe. That is not a budget-related item. Community forum, I believe, is going to be scheduled for Monday, May 11th. I don't have a time on that. I think maybe 9 in the morning. That will be filmed and then presented YouTube and Facebook and what other kind of mediums that we can have. That will show, I believe, for a week, and we will collect as many emails and public responses as we can from that community forum, and then that will be brought to you at the governing board for a final budget review on May 20th, and then another governing board final approval again on May 28th.
Bill, I think that second governing board meeting is May 15, am I correct, not 20?
Oh, I'm sorry. Correct. Yes, ma'am. May 15th is a Friday.
And then there's another one on May 28th as well, which is a Thursday.
Which will be the regular meeting for voting.
Yes.
When are you going to pass, then you're going to pass the budget in June?
Yes, sir. The final budget is June
So
25.
We have time to do this one more meeting with the B&F before we move it, or it's a thought. I'm not getting much from this committee here to move it forward.
That'd be up to you, sir. That'd be an if needed.
Jim, it's Lisa, and I would like if you could do that only so that Harry could be a part of that.
Okay.
That's just a recommendation.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on that before I decide? You guys are really fun. All right. Well, we will move this to the next meeting. And so do your homework and let's see if we can't get it past the next meeting, because it's going to be kind of critical, the next one. I thought we could get moved today so that we wouldn't have a problem with the next meeting. But anyway, we will not ask for a motion. We will just leave it there, and we will hold a meeting whenever we can. We'll have to work that out, to be determined. Okay, committee comments on the agenda. I want everybody to respond yes or no, you have nothing, or whatever. So somebody say something.
It's Lisa.
I have no more comment.
Okay, I just had a question. At the start, Katie had made a comment about having questions after the meeting. So I wondered if were questions going to come in before we adjourned, or?
I'm going to do it right after I talk from you guys.
Okay.
Next, you have any other comments to make?
No.
Okay. Next, committee member.
This is John Nicholas. I think we could delay this budget until next meeting, even though I would vote for it, the entire $6 million if it was done today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
This is Marshall. I agree with that comment.
Okay. Next. John Hubble.
Okay, this is John Hobolt. I agree with delaying the final decision. However, as John would do, I would vote for it as it stands now, with one caveat, and that is a strong review before spending that last 1.9 million.
Ann Brown.
Strongly reinforce what John Hobolt just said.
Okay. Who did I miss? George?
No comment.
I think I got everybody, did I?
Mr. Young, if I could just throw one, this is Bill Schwinn again, if I can just throw one thing in there, just listening to the comments, would it not be, could someone just make a motion to just move this thing forward? I mean, and we'll have another B&F meeting to discuss it further, but just as far as protocol, I mean, there were several people that said they would make a motion if they would just do that and move it on to the governing board for review, and then we'll get it back again. Nothing's finally approved until.
In other words, if we don't finally approve the budget, any one of them, we're just moving it forward?
Yeah.
How about
with
that?
Those caveats that were mentioned by both Ann and John.
Somebody want to make that motion so they can keep moving forward?
This is Marshall. I'll make that motion.
Okay. Second?
This is Ann. I'll second it.
Second, there's a motion to move the budget process forward. All in discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Jim?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'd like a roll call vote on this one, please.
Roll call vote, please. Ann?
Yes.
Marshall?
Yes.
I lost my list. Lisa? John?
Yes.
Both of you? The other John?
Yes.
Did we miss any? George?
Yes.
Did we miss anybody? Okay, unanimous. All right, now we got through the comments. Now we do have some questions we ask before we get to these questions, does anybody in the audience that's on the phone have a question?
Jim, this is Karen. I just need one clarification on the last motion. It is to move the budget at the 6.2 level forward for governing board discussion, correct?
The budget process forward.
The process, the consideration to 6.2, or it's simply to move the process forward with no amount specified?
Correct. The latter.
Thank you.
Okay, I didn't hear any. Okay, Katie, are you aboard? Are you on?
Yes, I am. You all hear me?
Would you read the questions, please? We have,
sure, the first question.
Go ahead.
All right, the first question is from Marty Broadus, and he's asking specifically about the large dog park remodel since it was postponed in the current fiscal year due to the only bid we received on it coming in higher than expected. He's asking if additional funds will be added to the project and if it will be in next year's budget.
How are these people going to get these answers?
They can listen live, and then we will email them back with the specific questions.
Okay,
responses.
somebody taking care of that. That's all I'm asking. Okay, Carl, would you answer the question? Or can you?
Yes, sir. This is Carl. So currently our budget is for $215,000. The one bid that we did receive was for $440,000, and it was incomplete. It had a level of scope of work that was not included, so that if we had more bids, I believe that it would either be higher or the same. And we are not at this time asking for any additional funds for the large dog park. This would be encumbered, as Pete had described, and I actually am out for rebid due to the market, construction market right now, and trying to confirm whether our one bid is justifiable or we'd have to have further discussion in the future.
Okay, that answered that question. Next question.
All right, thank you. This one is from Terry Burns. He is asking, with the current shutdown, are you considering not raising the rec fees?
Bill, do you want to take that one?
This is Pete. In previous, the workshop for the governing board and the BNF is been described that the shutdown of the facilities was the impetus for, trying to abate some of the fees. I think Bill clarified pretty confidently that the 90% of the fees go to infrastructure that's not even related to any of the rec centers. And so the start point of the $17 was retained. If you were to isolate the P&L of just administrative costs, the vast majority of our our operating costs is labor. The vast majority of our expenses related to rec centers are in the monitors, and those are all under the auspices of the minimum wage. At this juncture, on January 1st, the legislation that was passed is going to still increase those people by the CPI, the price index at the federal level next January. We're expecting that to be 2 to 2.5%. And so our cost structure is, with almost certainty, is going to be going up. And so the 3.5% was retained solely to offset those cost increases. A second increase that occurred in this year is due to the catastrophic losses that are being incurred for social justice awards at the jury, and also for catastrophic losses from hurricanes and fires and all that. We had a $50,000 increase, in our property insurance, property casualty insurance. So those costs are not going away, and we would strongly recommend that a modest 3.5% be retained to cover those increases.
Next question. Katie? Katie, are you there? We lost the IT person. Now we're in trouble. Katie.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah.
Hang on just a second. Hang on just a second.
Okay.
Okay, this one is from Jim Krause. He's got a three-part question. The first one was about the dues, and I think we've answered that. The second one is, can we obtain a delay or push out Grandview, Pebblebrook, or Stardust Golf Course? I think we've covered that as well. So then the final question is kind of about COVID-19. When can the card clubs meet again if we're all sitting at the same table? We can't maintain a 6-foot distance. And I know that GM has an answer on that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Answer.
Thank you, Jim. We're kind of using the federal metrics as far as when we start opening our facilities up. Obviously, we've got golf starting on Monday with all safety precautions built in there. We're trying to get through step one, which we consider like the outdoor recreation facilities, be it tennis, pickleball, lawn bowling, bocce, mini golf, and those types of things. So we are working with the club presidents there on safety precaution and rules that they're presenting to us to be able to maintain it being as safe as we can. But when it comes to the indoor facilities, I believe Governor Ducey's talking today. We'll see what he has to say about reopening in the state of Arizona and where we are considering the peak that we're seeing. But in our conversation this morning with local fire and the medics that are in the Sun City area, we are seeing a bit of a rise. And basically the metrics that the federal government has put out there that we're kind of keeping an eye on is the downhill trend. And so when the numbers, and we start seeing the numbers slide downhill as opposed to uphill, they're recommending a 14-day downhill cycle before we move into that next phase. And so that's kind of where we're at. Well, I think we're probably a couple of weeks away. But unfortunately, you know, from what I'm seeing and talking with the medical professionals today, I think they're reporting another 232 cases statewide and another 18 deaths. So not great numbers that you want to be hearing. And then they are a couple of days behind as far as posting, as far as the numbers locally go. And so I think we jumped from, you know, low double-digit 10 numbers to up to 45. And I think you're going to see a little bit more of a jump in that as current data gets posted. But we need to get ourselves on a bit of a downhill slide here locally before we look at opening facilities.
Thank you. Question.
The next question is from Gary Turner. He wants to know if Rec Center's management has applied for any of the well-publicized SBA loans to different entities affected by mandatory shutdowns.
And in response to that, yes, we have. We did get notification from the Small Business Association, at least on round one, that we did not meet. Well, we got in past the deadline of when the funds were expended. We are in. We don't have an SBA number currently, but they did accept our application, and we're waiting for funding at a round two, and that's a $2.2 million rate. So as far as protecting one's paychecks here, as far as the reimbursement goes. So yes, we are participating in that program, and we hope as a 501c4 we are eligible.
Thank you. Next.
Okay, so the next two questions, I'll read them separately, but I'm sure Carl can answer them at the same time. The first one is from Paul and Lori Perella. Is there any possibility that work can begin on the pool decking and parking situation at Koontz since everything is shut down? And the second question from Mike Linder, what's happened to all the capital projects in this year's budget at Koontz? It doesn't appear that anything is being done there.
And the answer to that is on May 4th, you will see the Koontz projects in their entirety begin all at once. We will begin with bringing in the fencing for safety, setting up our perimeters, and beginning with demo. There is no delay in our project. There is a very slight chance of delays in some materials just due to how warehousing and supply chain is being affected. But to date, the vendor has no delays in their schedule. Based on the way the COVID situation is working out and expected to, be better, I think everything will just naturally recover in our schedule for that construction. As far as the answer for the pool decking, that is a scheduled event that would happen later in the summer. And currently, the plans are that the pool will stay open with a monitor in the swim and fitness building, but all other areas of the swim and fitness building will be closed. So we will have a monitor. People can use the pool. They will use the outside restrooms on the pool deck. And we will maintain that open until I have to close it to do the decking later in the summer.
Okay, that answers those. You got any new questions, Katie?
No, those are all the questions I have.
Okay, one last time. Does anybody have any questions or comments to be made?
This is Jim. This Mark.
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim. This is Jim Sloan. There was a misstatement about Boomer's leadership asking to have their project removed from the budget, and that was not correct. So I think Bill or Carl, you want to speak to that before we sign off today?
Yeah, I certainly can. This is Bill Swin. We did send an apology to Lisa, and again, publicly here, I'd like to do it once again. When we were doing our budget presentation, I believe at the last go-round, there was an inference made that the Boomer's president and vice president that we spoke about incorrectly were recommending that the Boomers project be removed. That was a committee decision, obviously, and so I just wanted to reach out. I think Carl and I, when we were working on the presentation, we kind of called people out individually and said, thanking them for their support and that type of thing when we were looking kind of to reduce our budget numbers. So again, I want to apologize personally to those that we offended, both Harry and Lisa, and that has been corrected. That won't happen again. So I'd like to move forward from there. But thank you all for your support and your time today, and it really helps us kind of move forward.
Any other comments? Somebody else wanted something.
Yeah, I've changed my mind. I'm going to call Carl personally. Okay, this is Marshall.
All right. Well, thank you again. I will let you know the next time we have a meeting. And thank you, everybody, for participating. And I will adjourn the meeting.
Bye.
Thank you.
Call recording is off.